I'm Chef Frank, this is Protocooks, and today we're making a Metropolitan cake. Metropolitan cake is a cake I had when I was a kid, and it was made by a bakery called Entenmanns. Now, I know Entenmanns, you can find it across the country, but it's really prevalent in the Northeast where I'm from. I'm from Long Island in New York, and this company actually started out in Bay Shore, Long Island. When I was a kid, this was kind of a staple in the house. Whenever we had a cake, we had an Entenmanns cake. For special occasions, birthdays, when people came over, there was always an Entenmanns cake. And this cake, I don't know when they discontinued it, but they discontinued it. They don't make it anymore. And ever since I'm a kid, I've always whatever happened to that cake? And as I became a chef, I decided that I was going to chase that cake and actually make it myself. So it took me a year or two of just kind of tinkering and people getting sick of me making cake, but I finally have it down. For my Metropolitan cake, this is what you're gonna need. Eggs, sugar, powdered sugar, water, vegetable oil, flake coconut that's sweetened, crisco, butter, flour, baking powder, cream of tartar, cornstarch, salt, vanilla, and raspberry preserves with no seeds. I wanna take a second here to talk about the flour for this cake. We're going to use cake flour. Now, I never have cake flour in the house, but this is a quick and easy way to make your own cake flour. I have some all-purpose flour, right? I have 2 cups here. I'm gonna take out 4 tablespoons of that all-purpose flour, all right? And I'm gonna add 4 tablespoons of cornstarch to my all-purpose flour. And I'm just gonna whisk it up. And that is basically how we're gonna make our cake flour for this. If you wanna buy it, feel free to buy it, but I just find it a lot easier to make it. I like to start with mixing and sifting my flour for this. So I have my flour, my granulated sugar, my salt, and my baking powder. They all go into a little bowl. Just gonna give it a quick stir. And then I get a larger bowl and I have my nice little nifty sifter thing that, I don't know if it was my grandmother's or my mother's, but it really works well to sift things. So you basically just throw it in here. And basically what this does is it breaks up any clumps, right? It makes our flour mixture nice and smooth, not lumpy at all. I think it's a lot of fun too if you have kids. This is always fun for the kids to do. The base for this cake is a chiffon cake, which is a light and airy vanilla cake. And it's a little more complicated than just kind of stirring everything together. We have to separate eggs out to yolks and whites. And we're gonna whip our egg whites and fold them into the cake batter to make it nice and light and airy. When you're whipping egg whites for anything, you gotta make sure that your bowl is not only clean, but there's no fat in it. Any fat gets in there, they will not get to their full volume. You can whip them, but they're just not gonna get light and fluffy. So you gotta be really careful. Make sure your bowl is clean. Make sure you don't get any egg yolk into it. All right, let's go. We wanna make sure again that we don't get any yolk in there. So back and forth, put your yolk in a separate bowl. Save the yolks, we need them, so don't throw them away. You can go shell to shell, or you can just go in your hand and let the white drip through. Sometimes I find that's just a little bit easier. All right, we're gonna set the whites aside, and we're gonna mix our wet with our dry ingredients. So I have my vanilla. I'm gonna put a little vanilla into my egg yolks, and I don't measure vanilla. I'm really bad like that. I'm just not that pastry chef, right? Our vegetable oil goes in, and our water. And I'm just gonna kind of blend this together really well. Get a little whisk, break up your yolks, kind of just, so there's no kind of like strands of yolk in there, right? All right. And then we're gonna take this mixture and put it into our sifted flour mixture. And I'm gonna just make this in kind of a smooth batter. I'm trying not to like mix it up too much so that it gets kind of chewy, but remember we have cake flour in there, so it's not really gonna get too much gluten formation. So I'm gonna fold this together so there's really no lumps, and I'm gonna put that aside, and we're gonna whip our egg whites. I got my mixer out. If you don't have one, you can do this with one of those handheld mixers. If you want to do it by hand, you can, but I think you're crazy and you'll probably be sweating through this cake. Egg whites are in there. I have a little cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is just an acid that stabilizes egg whites, makes them hold together and not kind of like deflate quickly. So that's in there. On the machine, get your whisk. And we're gonna whip these to stiff peaks. And I'll show you what stiff peaks is when they're done. Let's check our peaks, and this is what you do to check your peaks. You take the bowl off, you take a little bit of egg white and you hold it up, and if it's a stiff peak, it stands pretty much straight up. I think we're good to go on this. Before we fold the egg whites into the batter, I want to talk about the pans we're going to bake these in. I like to use the glass Pyrex baking dishes. This is an 8x8, this is a 9x13, and this batter makes like 1.5 cakes, so you get kind of a bonus cake out of it, right? I just found that if you use all the batter in the 9x13, it's way too thick, and I want this to be a fairly thin cake. So I put most of it, like 2/3 in here and 1/3 in here. They do not need to be greased. The chiffon cake needs to climb up the side, and if you grease it, it will be a flat pancake. So you do not grease these pans. I have these ready before I fold because I want to fold the egg whites in and get it right in the oven right away. So I have my batter, I have my egg whites, and I always do light into heavy. These are super light, this is really heavy. I will put a little bit of egg white in there, like a sacrificial bit that I'm not worried about keeping the air in. And what this is gonna do, this is gonna lighten this batter a little so that when I fold it together, it doesn't beat up all the other bubbles there or beat them out. The second addition, or the rest of the egg whites, I'm really concerned, right? I'm gonna take this, drop my egg whites in, and I'm gonna be really careful not to get the air out of the egg whites, right? So I'm gonna go below in the middle and fold. I'm kind of folding over and turning the bowl as I go. And that's kind of how you're gonna fold in your egg whites whenever you're doing a cake like this. You're not just gonna mix it. So I'm gonna fold it and turn my bowl, and I'm taking from the center and going into the center. Go down to the center, fold over the top, down the center, go over the top. If you have to go on the outside too to get some of that outside batter, that's good. I want to do this until I don't really have any streaks left. No streakiness. Good, I think I'm good there. And then I'm going to take my baking dishes and I'm going to put most of the batter in here. And I'm going to put some of the batter in here. I think that's good. I'm going to put a little more in this dish. Make sure we get all the batter. Okay? And this is going to go directly into a 325 degree oven until it is cooked through. So I'm going to go right into the oven. All right? That's going to be in there about 25 minutes, and when it's ready, we'll take it out. While the cakes are baking, we're going to make the frosting. Before we do the frosting, I want to talk about a couple ingredients going into the frosting. And because of my extensive research, it took me years to make this cake, obviously, I've tried a lot of different variations of it. I found that, for one, with the frosting, we're using butter, but I'm using Crisco brand shortening with it as well. Now the Crisco makes the frosting a little whiter. I found that when I use kind of store brands, it feels greasy to me. So I do buy Crisco brand for the frosting. The other thing I want to talk about is powdered sugar. I like to buy organic powdered sugar for this, and not because I'm fancy, right? Maybe I'm a little fancy. But for the most part, the organic powdered sugar has an additive in it. Usually powdered sugar has cornstarch in it, but organic powdered sugar has tapioca starch. And I find that you get a nice kind of smoother texture with this. When you use kind of store brand powdered sugar that's not organic, the cornstarch kind of gives it a graininess, and I find that the tapioca starch in the organic just makes it better frosting. So look out for these. It's worth spending the money on it. So this gets two tablespoons. 2 sticks of butter, unsalted. We're always using unsalted butter. I am going to put a pinch of salt in here because salt is a flavor enhancer, and we definitely want some in there, but I don't want it in my butter because I really can't tell how much is in there, okay? 7 tablespoons of my Crisco. Okay, I'm going to do a little pinch of salt. Of course, the salt's behind me. And this goes on the mixer. Let me move my mixer over just a little bit. And I'm just going to turn this on and bring it together. Okay. I'm going to give it a little scrape down. I always kind of scrape down my sides as I go here. Get it off the paddles, scrape it down off the sides, make sure there's nothing kind of stuck in the bottom. And this is going to get about 3/4 pound of powdered sugar. And I can add that pretty much all at once. I'm not going to add all this. This is about 1 pound, and I'll reserve the other 1/4 pound. You have to be really careful here, okay? If you turn this on full force, you're going to look like you got like white clown makeup on. I'm going to add a little bit of vanilla extract to this. I'm going to add a little bit of milk as well, just to help dissolve the sugar and some of that salt in there. I'm going to turn this on real slow. Kind of just pulse it a couple of times. Don't go too crazy. And once kind of the powdered sugar is combined, I'm going to let it go. Now, I'm going to let it go for a good like 3 to 4 minutes just to get it light and airy. So I'm going to give it another scrape before I turn it on and let it go. This way we know that everything is kind of combined and incorporated. And then we let it go. All right, we're good to go. I'm going to take it off the mixer. One reason I like to whip it so much is because you get a really nice kind of white color. Look at how nice and bright white that is. Even though we have the butter in there that's a little yellow, the more air you whip in, usually the whiter this frosting is. And because I use that organic sugar, it's not grainy at all. You know what we should do though? Get your Star Wars tasting spoon. Delicious. It is a sweet frosting. A little bit of vanilla background. But it's super smooth because we use that organic sugar. So, all right, this is done. And the way that I tell that it's done is I have a skewer. And if the skewer comes out clean, the cake is ready to go. It's really puffed up right now. It's not the thickness that I want, but it will kind of deflate a little, and I'm okay with that. I want to make sure this is completely cool before I frost it. Our cake is completely cool. Now we can ice it. I'm just going to take my icing, plop some on top. You want a decent layer. You might not need all of the icing, and that's okay. You'll also notice that our cake is kind of deflated a little, and that's good. It's still nice and soft and spongy. It's not as airy as it was when it first came out, but that's fine. It's still really nice and light. I'm going to put a nice coating on my cake. And I just serve it in this container, right? I could take it out if I want, but I just like to serve it in the container. Okay, so let's get it iced really well, right? And then what you gotta do is this. You're gonna take your spatula and make some channels. 1, 2, 3. So I make these channels, and then I get my raspberry jam. I have a pastry bag. If you don't have a pastry bag, you can easily just do this with a spoon, but I like to use a pastry bag. I fill up my pastry bag with my raspberry jam. Again, this is seedless raspberry jam, and I like to go a little heavier on the jam than the cake actually had, right? Twist. I kind of work the jam a little just because it's kind of like still kind of all together. Give yourself a cut here, and then we just take this and do a nice line of jam in each channel that you've created. All right? Don't be shy. Right, a little more there. And then you get a really nice helping of your sweetened coconut. You could buy the store brand for this. Buy the better brand. It's got a little more moisture to it. It's not as dry. It has a much better coconut flavor. It's a little stronger coconut flavor, and that's what you want. I also go a little heavier on the coconut than the original cake had. And that's it. That is my Metropolitan cake. Let's cut a slice and get a taste of this. I like to get at least one stripe of raspberry for each slice because the raspberry makes it good. Look at that. Still nice and soft and spongy, but not like way too airy or way too dense. All right, let's give it a taste. I like to get a little bit of everything on the fork. Right, look at that. Jam, cake, coconut, deliciousness. Every time I have a bite of this, it brings me back. The cake is right, the frosting, the coconut, the raspberry. I think I've actually done a little better than Entenmanns. I hope that, it being fresh, it would be. But it just reminds me of childhood. And I think you guys should try it. If you don't like the coconut, you can leave it off. But the cake itself is absolutely delicious. That's right, I said it. Absolutely delicious. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give us a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. We have merch in the description down below. We also have an address down there. I want to thank my Patreon patrons for supporting us. Thank you so much. We appreciate the support. And that's it. That's my Metropolitan cake. I'm Chef Frank. This is Protocooks. Have a good one.